Okay. Have we all catched our breath? Have we taken a little breather? We got our cigar. Well, I had mine. Where the hell is it? Okay, it's right here. All right. So, we took a little sip of our bourbon. We've got our cigar in hand. Take a little bit of breather as we try to process everything that just happened in, say, the last 9 hours. It's a lot. Because now we have a little controversy. And I've never been more excited to see a selection show tomorrow. Clemson earns their way into the playoff, winning the ACC championship on a last-second 56-yard field goal. Props to SMU, and we'll get to them in a minute. I promise you. Penn State earned a little bit more respect from me tonight. Arizona State could be dangerous in this college football playoff with their performance today against Iowa State. But we're going to get into the question that I'm sure is going to be discussed in Facebook groups, group chats, you name it. We're going to get there in just a second. We just got to take our breath for a moment. Because, wow, that was some intense football near the end. So, let's take a little puff. And a little bit of a sip. And we'll get started. You could say that the ACC championship was one of the best, but obviously the SEC title game between Georgia and Texas, a knockdown, drag-out brawl. Ugly, sloppy, defensive football, which was kind of expected from me. Now Georgia has earned their way into a first-round bye. And the interesting thing about all of this is now, okay, with Penn State losing to Oregon, do they drop? How far do they drop? Do they drop at all? Texas is number 2. How far do they drop? Because you got to think that Georgia is probably going to be in the number 2 slot in tomorrow's rankings. The one thing that we know for certain is the 11 teams that are in, and that Oregon and Georgia are 1 and 2. I think we can all agree on that. We know Notre Dame is in. We know Ohio State's in. We know Tennessee is in. And we know, although some would probably disagree, Indiana is in. So we know that there's 11 spots that are already taken. Arizona State with the Big 12 championship. Clemson with the ACC championship. Boise State with the Mountain West championship as the others who have been added. And what will be interesting too is now does Arizona State get that 4th and final bye? I think they do. I don't know how far you can move Clemson up in order to give them a first-round bye. And if I said that Clemson earned a first-round bye, I apologize. I was getting ahead of myself. So that leaves the one question on everyone's mind, where SMU had the opportunity to seal their fate into the college football playoff without even having to put their fate in the hands of the committee. Admirable comeback, because they were down big. An admirable comeback at the last second, and then having their hearts ripped out with the last second field goal. So now that leaves, who's in that last spot? Is it SMU or is it a 3-loss Alabama? And Alabama has been discussed a lot in the last couple of weeks, even with their really bad loss to Oklahoma. But with SMU's loss tonight, how much of that dynamic changes? Now that it wasn't a blowout loss as it was anticipated in the first half of the ACC title game. And remember what Ward Manuel said about some of the teams that are not in play, they may not move. And I think at this point, it's Alabama and it's SMU. Ole Miss, South Carolina, Miami. There's no point in even bringing it up. There's no point in bringing up those three. And I'll tell you why. First with Miami. They have no ranked wins, and the only thing that they can argue is that they're 10-2, and they have losses against 9-3 and 7-5 teams. One of those teams, by the way, Georgia beat in a lot of overtimes. But that's all Miami has. And listen, I was rooting for Miami. I wanted Cam Ward and the Hurricanes to be in the playoff. And they had their opportunity. They had, let's say, a path of least resistance. And they messed it up. That's on them. So Miami, non-starter in this whole conversation. Then you get to South Carolina, Ole Miss, and then Alabama to SMU. Well, South Carolina, and I remember someone on Threads telling me, South Carolina has better wins than Alabama. Because I was looking at it and saying, there's a chance a 3-loss Alabama would get in. But South Carolina has better wins. Do they? Clemson, Texas A&M might be their best two. And who won head-to-head? Ole Miss played them, beat them. Alabama played them, beat them. So how do they jump those two? You can try to bring the logic to me until you're blue in the face. But I'm not going to buy it because the data tells me something else. South Carolina, out. Then it comes down to Alabama, Ole Miss. Identical records. Identical good wins. Ole Miss has wins over Georgia, LSU. Alabama has wins over Georgia and LSU. So where's the 6 degrees of separation? Here they are. Ole Miss, Alabama, both have bad to mediocre losses. Ole Miss lost to Florida, lost to Kentucky, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, and lost to Oklahoma in that dreadful, dreadful performance. But Kentucky finished the season 4-8, and that was at home. So as much as we talk about Alabama's loss to Oklahoma, Ole Miss losing at home to Kentucky, who finished 4-8, it doesn't move the meter for the Rebels for me. So now, that totally leaves Alabama in the path, and now with SMU. And I'll tell you this right now, which, by the way, let's just throw another log on the fire here. If you ask me what the committee is going to do, I don't know. I really don't. Because they've been I wouldn't say all over the place, but I almost feel like they may have painted themselves in a corner with this. Now, I saw the graphic on ESPN tonight comparing the two resumes, where it showed that Alabama has a 3-1 record against the current CFP Top 25, which is accurate. SMU is 0-1 against the current CFP Top 25, which is also accurate. But also, the teams Alabama beat when they were ranked, they're 3-1. And for SMU, they do have 2 wins over top 25 teams in the AP. But is it enough? Because you could argue in 2 of their biggest games, BYU and Clemson, they came up short. It's like, and I know the simple argument that some will throw out there will be, well, SMU has 2 losses. Alabama has 3, and they have a bad loss to Oklahoma. And I know we're going to hear it ad nauseum and continue to do so. And I don't deny it was a bad loss. But they do have a top 10 win, which SMU does not. They have one more top 25 win than SMU does. And I think after last year, when Alabama was a one-loss team getting in over an undefeated Florida State, I think that told us going forward that it's easier to make an argument for a 3-loss team against a 2-loss team than it would be to make an argument for a 3-loss team against a 1-loss team. Again, we will know tomorrow what will happen. But I think that there is an argument for Alabama. You can talk about the bad in their season, but you can't ignore the good, because they have some good. Don't deny the bad, but you can't deny the good. And for those who are going to go out there, I know it's going to happen. Well, Vegas would have them favored by double digits in a hypothetical neutral site situation, which is the laziest argument I hear constantly. And I'm here to tell you that Alabama doesn't need it. So for my Alabama fans out there, if you have a fellow Alabama fan that's out there saying, well, Vegas says this, tell them to stop. And then if they don't stop, spray them with a water bottle, kind of like what I do with my pit bull. It'll aggravate them, but it'll get the message across. Because you don't need the argument. You don't need a hypothetical argument to make the argument. Am I going to be mad if Alabama gets in or gets left out? No. Am I going to be mad if SMU or gets in or gets left out? No. Why? Because we're talking about the number 12 spot. Where at this point you're putting your fate in the hands of the committee, when you could have handled business and made your own fate. But it is going to be very, very interesting to see what transpires in all of this. Does the committee backtrack on their talk about, well, the teams that didn't have a game tonight, they're not going to be reevaluated? But does SMU get thrown all the way down to number 12? Because more questions are going to be, does Penn State drop? How far does Texas drop? Because you have to move a little bit around, don't you? So it'll be interesting to see what comes from that. And then we look at the pros and cons of this new 12-team playoff. I'll say this, I was absolutely 100% wrong when talking about the inevitable expansion and how it may water down the regular season. I was 100% wrong on that, because this season has been a roller coaster ride. And we're still here talking about the fate of 2 teams for one final spot. I like the pros of it because a team like Clemson can redeem themselves through the conference and sneak their way back in. I think that's great. Teams like Arizona State can have a seat at the table. Shout out to Kenny Dillingham. A hell of a turnaround that he has done at Arizona, where it just seemed like it was going to be a poverty program that was going to go nowhere after the regime of Herm Edwards. So props to him. And Cam Scatterbo, fun-sized Mike Allstott. That's my comparison of him. And that team has been fun to watch all season. And I'm looking forward to who they match up with in this upcoming playoff, or where their opponent will be. Because again, they could now, with Clemson winning tonight, get the first round bye. And There was talk about how the elite oligarchy, to kind of quote Josh Pate, was going to be broken up with this expanded playoff. But it's only given them more mulligans and more chances to get in and possibly catch fire and be right back where they were. I don't like the idea of a possible further expansion that was discussed over the summer, which it could happen if money is to be made. But the cons of it are that now I feel like Alabama will be a good example of this, which I think before there have been exceptions for bad losses. Like the 1 year, I think Ohio State lost to a really, really bad Virginia Tech team, but still found their way into the playoff and won the national championship. But bad losses have hurt them in the past. But I don't think they hurt as much as you think. Because I feel like after last year's precedent was set with Alabama and Florida State, we have to kind of reset our mindset going forward because the precedent has been broken. I don't see as many cons in the 12-team playoff for right now. Because I think there has been a lot of good. This has been a hell of a season. It's been a great, great roller coaster season. Everybody, I would say not everybody loves parody, but I think most people do like a little parody, a little excitement, a little bit of, oh my God, that really happened. And we've seen a lot of it more often this season than others. But I've never looked forward to a selection show than I have for this one tomorrow night. It's going to be wild. And you are going to have some people mad. Like I feel SMU had their chance to put themselves in the field without any doubt. And they failed to do it. And if Alabama gets left out, you lost to Oklahoma and Vandy, that's on you. But I think for the most part, the committee has done a good job with this. So far. So far. And we'll see where that goes. For the Heisman, I think it's pretty clear that Travis Hunter is probably going to win. The last Vegas odds had him at an absurd favored number. Ashton Jeanty had a great performance last night in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. But I don't know that if it's enough. If I look at the players that are going to get invited, I think it might be 3, maybe 4. It's going to be Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, Dylan Gabriel first, and then possibly Cam Ward. Because Cam Ward's thrown over 4,000 yards this season. 36 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, I think, for the whole year. That's still impressive, even though that Miami ended the season on a fizzle. But when we talk about Travis Hunter as the two-way Iron Man, we've seen it before with Charles Woodson. We've seen it before with Deion Sanders. And they've been kind of a rarity. But in this new era of college football, could we see a lot more athletes doing that going forward? I know it's been experimented with some of the with some schools and some players. But we see it more prevalent in the years to come? Because you already see a lot of these 5-star recruits, some of them played both sides of the ball in high school. When it comes down to it, one may be a better running back than a linebacker, or vice versa. Another one would be a better safety or quarterback than a wide receiver, or a better defensive back than a quarterback. Remember the old story of Johnny Manziel? Mac Brown wanted him to be a defensive back. Kevin Sumlin saw him as a quarterback. But is there a benefit to it? Could it help a little bit with roster depth? The cons would be chances of injury increase. But I kind of want to see it. If they're doing it in high school, and then you've got athletes like Travis Hunter who are wanting to do it at the college level. Now, I think in the NFL it's going to be a good ways to go, because there's quite a bit of money invested for them to play one position, and you have to protect your investment. But I wouldn't mind seeing in the college game where you see more wide receivers and cornerbacks, running backs, safeties. I don't think anybody, if there's a quarterback, they're not going to rush him out there to play defensive back anytime soon. But just something I thought about during this week in the talks about Travis Hunter winning the Heisman, which we've seen it every once in a while in the two examples I pointed out, Deion Sanders and Charles Woodson. But could we see it more now in this new era of college football? And speaking of the new era in college football, NIL and the transfer portal. I hear this constantly. I hear it all the time. I see the social media posts about it. NIL and the transfer portal is ruining college football. But is it really? Is it really? Look, let's just take a little deep dive into this. It's easy to go in here and say, well, now these athletes are now spoiled rich kids who all only care about money. And I'll get into that a little bit more here in a second. If you want to say that the lack of regulation of NIL and the transfer portal is hurting the game, I'm willing to listen to that conversation. Because it's nothing but the wild, wild west now. There's no limit on money. There's no limit on the number of times you can transfer, which has been crazy. Which, by the way, the transfer portal is going to be opening up here pretty soon. And we're going to be right back in this again. But is it hurting the game? It doesn't seem that way. Because if you look at the deals, the media rights deals that these conferences are getting, they're still making money. The ratings are still through the roof. Some people may tune out of it, but it's not hurting the game. I think the lack of regulation does hurt it to an extent. And who is the blame on that? Is it the schools and the conferences because they have basically turned college athletics into a multi-billion, let me repeat that, $billion business? Where the athletes finally said, hey, what the hell? Why are we getting our piece? We're out there putting in all the work. Which is where we are today. The NCAA for trying to defend its archaic business model. And their, I wouldn't say inability, but the stubbornness to adapt. Because some of the past rules about the NCAA, like you can only get so much food at a banquet, It's just absurd to be considered an impermissible benefit. A lot of it's stupid. The kicker at UCF who had a YouTube channel and he had to stop it or quit playing football. There's so many opportunities now today to make money, build your brand when it comes to sports. And it's not just football. And if you look at these athletes now, what was it, Bryce Underwood just got a $10 million bag from Michigan to flip. And I love the whole thing about, oh, there's no pride. There's no pride in the sport anymore. It's not about... Think back to when you were 18 years old. Let's go back. 18-year-old Jason. Let's just say it. Then in a hypothetical world that I was 6'3", 180 pounds, and an arm like a howitzer. And somebody's going to offer me $25,000 to play for their school. I'm not going to sit there and go, man, I just love the game. I just love the competition. Bull crap. You take the bag. You take the money. That's life-changing money for you. Or did I say 10 million, 10,000. We know they got a lot of money. They got a lot of money. My bad. But you're going to take the bag. Because that's life-changing, generational wealth. Just for being the best in the high school level in your sport. You're not going to turn that down. You'd be stupid to. So to an extent, I don't even know if it's even hurting the game. But it's the lack of regulation of it does really make you wonder. And again, the NCAA and their inability to evolve and get ahead of it, waiting on a Congress to pass some kind of federal legislation to regulate name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal. Yeah, they're not going to be doing anything with that in a while. And if they do, it's probably going to be too restrictive, because how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube now? How do you do that? With where we are right now, how do you put that toothpaste back in the tube and get some control over it? That is to be determined. Well, I hope you enjoyed this fireside chat tonight. And looking forward to the college football playoff rankings tomorrow. If you like the content, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, give me a follow. Maybe I'll do this again. Who knows? See ya. And cheers.